listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plymer. Bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby. Sharing ideas to make the game better.
Welcome to episode 86 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plymer, and joining me today is Robin MacDowell. Robin is Rugby Canada's lead in talent identification for the women's national team and is a former player for the Canadian Sevens team. He has coached extensively across Canada and even led the Mexican women's team in their historic qualification for the 2018 Rugby World Cup Sevens. It's a pleasure to have him on the show, so welcome, Robin.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
Yeah, no worries. You're over in Vancouver Island, beautiful Vancouver Island. How's it going with the lockdown, and what are some things you got going on during that time?
Well, my fiance and I relocated this past fall. So if we could ever be locked down somewhere, it's definitely a good time to be on the West Coast. We're actually living over top of the ocean in beautiful Maple Bay, BC. So doing a bit of fishing, a bit of prawn, and a bit of crabbing, and I've had a number of athletes reach out. So doing a bit of online coaching, and that's been an opportunity to grow and develop as a coach to try and support some athletes while they're at home.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll get into that a bit later, no doubt. And touched a little bit. You played sevens with the national team. What's a bit of a backstory about when you started and your playing journey there?
Yeah, well, like most Canadian kids, grew up playing every sport, especially on the West Coast here, and baseball, hockey, and then literally any kind of sport within school and a lot of running. And then later in my teens, I decided to hang up my skates. I got involved with the Cowichan Rugby Club. Back then, they didn't really have a juniors program. So I got to play with the Cowichan Second Div. So back then they had a Cowichan Premier team and a Second Division men's side. And fortunately enough, in my grade 12 year, we won the Premiers and the Second Div for BC, hosting the finals at Cowichan. And I hung up my baseball glove, I hung up my skates, and I fell in love with the sport from there. And then in my first year of college, I was going to school at back then it was Malaspina College. Now it's Vancouver Island University, I believe. Mm-hmm. I was halfway through the year, and I had a number of coaches reach out to me from across the U.S. and Europe, and I was about to go to Oregon, the University of Oregon, to play rugby there. And then I had a guy from northern France in Lille reach out to go there, and it was, I think it was 2000. So France had finished second at the 99 World Cup. And I figured, wow, this would be great for my development and having a bit of a bilingual background. I jumped on that opportunity. So I played a season of pro in France and then a season of pro in northern Italy in Ferrara. And that was life-changing for a small-town Canadian kid that had barely been on an airplane, let alone a city bus. And while I was over there, I decided I want to represent Canada in sevens. So after a couple of years overseas, I relocated and wanted to study at UVic and pursue playing sevens for Canada. And that's kind of where it all got started for me.
That's awesome. And you mentioned Cowichan there. They're probably in my top five favorite names for a rugby club, the Piggies.
Yeah, they're well. What an experience! We were talking to a coach overseas recently, a Welsh coach, and he mentioned how much singing's involved in rugby in Wales. And I said, well, we're one of the few clubs. Obviously, I've been on the road. I've been a rugby gypsy for the last 20 years. But whenever I'm back, anytime you walk in the club, it's a sing song around the piano, and it's a real beautiful pitch, pavilion. Log clubhouse surrounded by agricultural land, right near a lake and about 5 minutes from the ocean. So very, very special place to kind of get introduced to the older club style rugby.
Yeah, perfect. And what about coaching? What were some of your first coaching experiences and reflecting back on those? What were some of the big takeaways that you grabbed from that?
Well, like most Canadians involved in amateur sport, we kind of coach how we were taught. And I think coaching in general, I started at 14, I'm 40 now. So I started coaching soccer. I coached basketball, baseball, and then rugby. I guess I got really serious when I finished my international career in the late 2000s. And I connected with Mark Bryant, the editor and owner of BC Rugby News. Mm-hmm. And I just knew there was so much more talent out there. I got cut for 7 years for Canada. And in that time, there was bigger, stronger, faster athletes that flew in from Montreal or Saskatchewan or Ontario in the middle of the winter to an open trial. And they weren't set up for success, but they were bigger, stronger, faster than me. And I kept in touch with a number of those guys over the years, and I said, stick with it. And, I knew if I didn't commit to my dream and I didn't follow through on it, then I wouldn't be able to inspire the next generation. Because ultimately, I love Canadian rugby and the Canadian Sevens story, and always wanted Canada to go, 1 or 2 or 4 better than we did in my era. And so I kind of made it my journey in around 2007, 2008 to travel around BC at that time. The Vanier High School in Comox was winning the provincial championship over all the top schools. So I'd handpick them, likes of Patrick Kay, Justin Douglas from Fraser Valley. There's Doug Fraser from Ladysmith that are playing the MLR. A number of those guys started out with me, and then that kind of got me going. And then Carl Fix from Saskatchewan with the Dog River Howlers, he started asking me to coach player for the senior Howlers and pushed them to get a junior program. And then from there, we took the first ever junior U18 quasi national team, international team to the Las Vegas Sevens in the inaugural year, with the likes of the guys that I told you before, and we lost in overtime to the U.S. U18 team. And back then I said, we need a junior national team program. So that's kind of really where I kind of got my cutting my teeth specifically on kind of higher level sevens. But I've coached at the university level for 13 years, and I just have just as much fun coaching kids too, Andy.
Yeah, no doubt. And from that, it sounds like giving players opportunities to play and to perform was a big observation for you there.
Yeah, well, it's the diamonds in the rough, and fast forward to 2020, where I'm doing talent ID for the Canadian system. A number of the athletes are from rural parts of our country. They're shoveling the snow, they're riding horses, they're wrangling calves. And, when you look at a lot of the national team 15 sevens men and women, they're from tier 2 schools, i.e. not your top demographic schools, or not your main urban centers. So I went after those athletes. And from my business experience, a lot of those customers, you got to get in your car and you got to go find them. You got to talk to the parents. You got to explain the opportunities for the athletes. So yeah, definitely. I've been hitting the road for the last 14, 15 years looking for talent.
Yeah, no doubt. So, it leads you into your role with Rugby Canada now as leading up the talent identification for the women's programs. Under normal circumstances, what's that role look like? What would your day-to-day tasks be?
Well, a lot of it until this stopped was weekend travel. So typically leave on a Friday and head out across mainly Western Canada at that point over the winter. A lot of indoor training camps for the U18 and next gen 15s, as well as regional indoor prairie U18 sevens competitions. And but before I get on the road, I'm working the phones every day. So unfortunately, the weekend that COVID hit, I was meant to go work with Rugby Manitoba we had the RBC training ground, the Olympic testing event. And so I went to all those as well every weekend. But rather than just flying in and flying out, I wanted to set up with all the local coaches and the provincial coaches and all our provincial leaders before I go out on the ground. That way I could maximize my time on the ground and explain the pathway, answer any questions, have a look at their athletes, understand their challenges and weaknesses. And then just kind of my other role with Rugby Canada is working with the Rugby Canada Development Academy. And so I'd be doing that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in the mornings, and then doing skills for the UVic men and women in the evenings. So basically rugby 7 days a week and a bit of skills in between. So yeah, doing what I love every day.
Yeah, for sure. And you seems like your passion is around sevens. What's for you as a sevens coach when we look at, for me, I look at it and they're almost two totally different sports with a lot of similarities across. Positionally, what do you think about what some of the key positional understandings coaches need to have to coach sevens? Often they're coming from a 15s background, and then there's a sevens window where they need to prep a team. What's some of the things you've learned in the past around key positional areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you want to keep it very simple. And when I played on the World 7 Series, a number of the other UVic guys did too. And we would go from a World Series event, and then we'd hop back into the BC Premier League. And we'd have to make that adjustment. But the biggest thing is just the speed, like the pace in sevens, obviously the fitness. But from a positional standpoint, positions are essentially just set pieces, right? So scrums are lineouts. You're a winger, you're a center. But outside of that, it's the set piece, the scrums, and the lineouts for more of the forwards. For the backs, we keep it very, very simple. For me, simplicity is king. And for developing coaches or coaches that are working with development athletes, what I recommend is just that, keeping it as simple as possible. I really coach athletes to play what's in front of them, put people into space and look for space, but be super have your lineouts and scrums nailed down to a T as far as safety goes, but also execution. You don't need a million plays, but the plays you do have, make sure your athletes know them. But from a positional standpoint, we want athletes to be able to play, typically, at least all the backs be able to play anywhere in the backs, and the forwards to be able to play anywhere in the forwards, because you get two injuries in a weekend, and all of a sudden, all hell will break loose. So I think simplicity is king. And going back to my early days coaching sevens for the Howlers and stuff, I worked really, really hard, like a lot of us do when we're young coaches. And now I work a lot smarter and just kind of going where you are in the season, how much time you have to prep, all those different things contribute to it. So, but I think the majority of those coaches out there in North America that aren't coaching at a full-time high performance level, 12 months a year or 10 months a year, you want to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah. So by that, do you mean like core skills around things like run, catch, pass, tackle, and then some set piece positional stuff? Yeah.
And a big focus for me is the ruck. Yeah. And literally the ball carrier. You can watch any level. People are completely loose with the ball, and the amount of turnovers. And when is the ball most vulnerable? It's most vulnerable in the contact area. So just being super aggressive for the ball carrier and fighting to get that ball back for security.
Yeah. All right. Cool. And you touched a little bit there on prep time. Often that's what it is. It's like, hey, seven's coming up. You've got a week, 2 weeks, 4 sessions to prep your team. If you're a coach and you're limited with time to train and prepare, how do you kind of prioritize what's going to come first and triage from there on?
If I'm being honest, number one for me with any team is culture. So making sure that culture's king. We set the expectations, but clarity and simple. So with little, most sevens tours, again, for the Howlers or the Barbarians or even Canada, I took the FISU team to Naples last year. We were hoping to have 2 sessions. We had 1. So the number one thing is I want to build a team. I want everybody on the same page. Own the warm-up, because in the warm-up, you go through all the things that you're going to need in the game. So I want them to know the warm-up inside out. And if they know the warm-up inside out, they know the game plan and they'll execute. But just focus on, again, the set pieces. Make sure you lock them down. You don't have to spend a lot of time on them, but make sure there's clarity there. But the only thing that I recommend nowadays, Andy, I turned a huge corner about a year ago, and that the only thing I measure now is what my athletes do when they don't have the ball.
Yeah.
So any high school boys team or any guy that gets the ball, it's going to be 1-on-5. I'm having to go. I'm going to score for sure. Of course, we get dumped on our head and we lose the ball and the other team goes 90. Women are great to coach because they're more selfless by nature, and they want their sisters to score, not them. But what I found, specifically working with the Saskatchewan boys, because I was consistently got to work with them for 4 years straight. I developed these boys, raised these boys on the field. And so we went to Tropical Sevens this last year, and they're kind of my guinea pigs, but we only focused on what we did when we didn't have the ball. Mm-hmm. And they checked both ways before they crossed the road. So then they got across the road safely. So I didn't have to say, make sure you pass the ball to the wing, or make sure in a 2-on-1 you do that. All I told them to do is have a look around. So you can see their heads before they get the ball, and they're looking for space, and they're looking for their teammates. Now, body language is there, hands are there, catch passes there. Like, we've already worked on all those things. But the biggest thing is the measurables. And the measurables then align to the team culture. If you're focusing on looking around and sharing the ball, then the guys are going to get along. And our results were phenomenal. Now, another layer to that, we videoed these games, of course, and we only videoed the guys off the ball.
Yeah,
we didn't video the tries, didn't video any of that stuff. And it just totally changed the way those athletes understood the game and read the game. But simplicity is king. And the last piece is a lot of kickers try and hang the ball 100 meters in the air on the 10-meter line at 17, 18 years old, and rather than putting it into space. So if you play money ball, like I play when I coach sevens, you play the odds, dump the ball into space, have a good defense, but as simple as you can. You might be a coach that's coached for 30 years and you have 30 chapters in your playbook, but your team's only on chapter 1, so you don't need to pull out chapter 30. You keep them on chapter 1, and when they're ready for chapter 2, then you pull out chapter 2. But in 5 years with Mexico, I only got to chapter 1.5, and we were on the introduction for the first 2 years.
Yeah. No, some good advice there. I like the one about working off the ball. It's something that I've looked at as well, especially post tackle. But in attack, I like it because it also kind of subliminally makes them understand the principles of player rugby a bit more. So the ball carrier's going forward. What are you doing as a support player to support them and create continuity? So I think that's a really good strategy for coaches to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big focus for me, again, I mean, I haven't touched on it, but skills all day. I don't think I learned how to pass a ball properly till about 6 years ago, about 10 years after my international career ended. And I love teaching skills and have some fun tactics to do that too. So
cool. Awesome. All right. Well, what are some big areas that you feel that, as a coach from sevens, transfer well into the 15s game? Well,
it's a great question again. I think sevens players are have to be gladiators. So, and sevens is often faster than 15s.
Yeah.
Because you typically have fitter, faster players.
That's why I stopped playing it.
That's good. But no, I mean, we come back to sevens. You have more time and you have less space, but you have more people. So your one-on-one tackling and then your evasion obviously is better, and then your passing. Like typically in sevens, you're having to pass the ball further and faster. But I think both games complement each other, and I'm really thankful that in my time, I was able to play a lot of 15s. And to be honest, yes, everybody associates me as a sevens guy, but I've probably played 98% more 15s than sevens in my life, and I've probably coached about the same. But sevens just often in warmer countries with nicer hotels, so that's definitely influenced a lot of my decision. But I think sevens individually just helps refine you as a player because you can't hide out there.
No, 100%. And, often we hear that comparison that, we want our players playing sevens because what they bring back to 15s is really beneficial, and I totally agree. What about the other way around? What are some of the things that the 15s players bring to sevens that is really helpful and a positive for a team you're coaching?
Well, I think 15s players are very, very technically refined in that they know their role. And skill-wise, 15s doesn't allow for as many chances or knock-ons or other things. Where in sevens, I might just fire the ball out there to Andy, to you in a windstorm. I know it's not going to hit you in the hands, but it's probably going to bounce 3 times and hit you. In 15s, you wouldn't do that. So there's that. And then ultimately tactically, right? So, in 15s, you're not necessarily going to run it out of your own end, right? Mm. You're going to pound it down the field. So you learn how to positionally do that stuff too. But I think having a good variation of both definitely complements each other, both offensively and defensively. And I guess just one thing that I wanted to circle back on your first question about sevens into 15s is sevens made me a better tackler, but it also made me a better communicator, because you can't be on the field 7-on-7 with one sweeper back, so basically 6 men up against Fiji, and not be talking. You're in full-on panic mode trying to stay on the ball. So when you come back to 15s, if you can bring that level of awareness and communication and listening, which is such a big piece, then you're going to add a lot of value to your 15s program.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Good stuff. And what if someone was coming to watch you coach a sevens session? What's it going to look like? You mentioned owning the warm-up there. What about the remaining pieces there for a practice session?
Well, I always have – I kind of live by and coach by 3 principles. Quality in everything we do, how we treat each other, how we talk, how we eat, how we sleep, all that. Together, we do everything for each other. Everything's for the team. So that's in every part of our conversation, and fun. And I should probably put fun at the start and the ending, but it's always got to be fun. So what I always challenge coaches is, doesn't matter what you want to train your team or what your goals are this season or tomorrow, how can you do that but make it fun? If you got fitness, have them chase each other, have them play freezer tag.
Yeah, 100%.
Be creative. So always kind of a fun atmosphere, and really a whole part whole, where we're learning something technical slowly, and then we're adding something fun in a game. And but yeah, just a positive, happy experience. I think when you're on the field coaching or you're doing anything in life, you have to be on. And we've all been on tour or been busy with our work life, and then we get on the field and we're dragging our butt there as a player. Well, as a coach, you have to turn it on. And when you get back in your car or get back home, then you can unwind. But when you step on the field, you gotta bring that energy, bring that passion, and make sure your athletes are living your culture.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, we mentioned in the introduction there that you've got a pretty cool story there around coaching the Mexican women's team to the 2018 Rugby World Cup for sevens. How did that come about? How did that start? And that journey must have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, I always, as much as I hate to admit it, Carl Fix from Saskatchewan, I got him to thank for many things in my life, and one of them was Mexico. So I was in Cuba playing and coaching the men's howlers team full of Pat Parfrey and a pile of other young stars at the time, and we made it to the Cup final despite having 4 injuries and picking up an Irish guy that was 89 or whatever. But anyhow, there we are in Havana, getting ready for a Cup final. I think it was like game 8. Or when Carl organizes these tournaments, it's always like he wants you to play like 1,000 games. So game 8. And right before our Cup final, the Howlers women were playing in the Cup final. And it was made up of kind of, as the Howlers back then used to mainly be, is future Canadians, current Canadians, and ex-Canadian internationals. We had a girl named Rosie Rivera that played for Mexico but was living in Canada. So they were losing. The women's Howlers were losing at halftime to the famous Atlantis group out of the States. And I went on to the field at halftime. They didn't have a coach. And I said, ladies, I don't want to undermine you, but I have a couple words of advice if you're interested. And they said, yes, please. And they were down 4 tries to nothing. I said, you have a fitter, faster team. If you pass the ball 2 or 3 times before you have a go, literally statically just pass the ball, you're going to have an empty net, and you're going to win. Anyway, they came back 5 tries, and they won 5 tries to 4. Perfect. Just like that.
Super coach.
It was literally like, yeah. They're like, wow, you're amazing. I'm like, well, there's an empty net, shoot the puck. But anyhow, Rosie engaged me. Listen, I her and her husband said, listen, she's involved with the Mexican team. We'd love to have you involved. Took 3-4 years, and finally we ended up hosting a camp in Saskatchewan Saskatchewan, and they did a bit of a Western Canada tour, and I was a guest coach. I consulted. And then I went down to Mexico for the Hong Kong qualifiers that fall, as well as the Central American Caribbean Games in Mexico. And then I just kind of consulted on a number of tours around the world for 2-3 years. And then in 2016, they didn't really have a team. Their coach left, didn't really have a side. And we found out about the berth for the 2018 Rugby World Cup. And so I really pushed it. I knew them then. I knew the whole system. I'd assessed everything, and the president said, "Okay, we'll build this team up again." But the program was in defunct for over a year. So my first camp, I had over 20 girls, but it was just kind of thrown together. And of those 20 girls, only a couple of them ended up coming to the World Cup. And I always said in those 3-4 years, there's more talent out there. And going back to my talent ID madness, I scoured the country for athletes. And every time I get an athlete from a new region, I would ask, is there other athletes like you? And just kind of found out the geography of the country and put in the work. And so we had a goal. My first camp was in April when I took over in 2017, and the World Cup qualifiers was in November. And we had no money. We couldn't afford to go on tour. We didn't have any balls, so I had to bring some old balls down. Our field looked like a parking lot, so we couldn't really do a lot of contact. And I said, listen, this year is going to be work. Next year, we're going to fly around the world. We're going to go to a World Cup. We're going to have it all. We're going to have sponsors. We're going to have kit. We're going to have it all. This year, we're going to grind. And some of them left their partners, quit their jobs, dropped out of school, left their families. They went all in with me. And the only way our why was for Mexico, because in that year we had a couple earthquakes while we were at the National Training Center. There was tsunamis that hit parts of Mexico that were affected. And so I started the campaign Por Mexico, which is for Mexico. And we had this hashtag and Road to the World Cup. We sold, 15,000 T-shirts, raised money. And 2 weeks before the World Cup qualifiers, which we were hosting in Mexico City, we hosted another tournament, invitational tournament, and we suffered. 7 of our starters got injured, and we had 2 teams in this tournament. So 7 of our top players that have been around got injured. And the reality is that it was no fault of theirs, but they hadn't been playing at this level for a long time, so their bodies were breaking down. And ultimately, I had built up a squad at that time over 50 or 60, a depth chart. I just kept bringing more and more girls in, And luckily we did that, because we ended up, of the 12 women that played in that qualifiers in November, 2 weeks later, the majority of them had never played international rugby, had only ever played club rugby in Mexico, and most of them were under 20 years old, most 17, 18, 19, and those little kids, they got it done. We won 5-0 in a cup final. We made history. And the other piece was, because we had such a young team, I really tried to tap into the Mexican culture, and they love to sing and they love to dance. So they always sing and dance. And as a Canadian, we don't sing and dance enough. So what I found was it really calmed them and it really brought them together. So I told them to come up with a song that would mean a lot to them. So they sang this song, Lindo Lindo. And we would do it before practice and after practice. We did it for 6-7 months. And when we got to the competition, they sang it in the huddle right before in the tunnel right before they ran onto the field. And it would take all their nerves. Now that it was in front of like 5,000-6,000 people in Mexico City on the President's ground. And it was a lot of pressure on these young girls. But the second they did that, it was like the Mexican hockey. Like, it would just light a fire, and the whole crowd was singing. I'd painted this picture for 6-7 months. So anyway, they ran out there and they sang the song, and then we ended up qualifying for the World Cup. And it was just, so emotional course. And as we're receiving the trophy, there's 6,000-7,000 Mexican supporters and family and friends singing this song. Just echoing across these grounds. And, we had a plan, we built a culture, and the biggest thing was building, a solution-orientated world where we were going to be hit with nothing but problems, but we had to find solutions. When I took over, the first thing I said is, we won't let you down, because historically women's sport in Mexico is always treated like a second-class sport, a second-class citizens. And being involved for 3-4 years, I knew some of those challenges. So the first thing I said to them is, if I promise you something or something's promised to you as a team, we're not going to let you down. I'm going to find a way, 100%. and it's okay to win. So we had to build a winning culture. And the coaches always say, build a winning culture. And what does that look like? In Mexico, Andy, it's okay to lose. It's totally okay to lose. Oh, you lost by 80? That's fine. Those girls are so nice. High five, kisses. I said it's not okay for us to lose anymore. I wasn't hard on them when we did lose, but I made it okay for them to win. And once they kind of changed that mindset, and whereas in Canada and Australia and different parts of the world, it's not okay to lose. We expect our national teams to be successful. It was just like turning a switch, and it was very, very motivating. The thing that I love most about, or I'm most proud of those women, is that after 2018, after we went to World Cup, World Rugby put out numbers, and there was more women participating in the sport of rugby than Canada, U.S., and any other country in all the Americas. And I don't even know where we were on the list before 2017. So the game is fully exploded down there. The standard is not there yet, but it's well on its way. And as a coach, you want to talk about a tool bag. We were making tools every day, and it was pretty special, as you can tell from my excitement.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I can tell how passionate you are about the experience, and also how invested you must have been to experience that. But you're saying before we hit record earlier, you had a pretty cool experience recently where you had on one of your Zoom calls with your athletes, you had a guest athlete come on and speak, and she was one of your former players from Mexico. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so we had Isabella Gonzalez come on, one of my captains, and she was a high-level soccer player before she started rugby. She'd only been playing rugby 8-9 months before I took over as head coach, and man, she followed the recipe to success, and she kicked off against New Zealand in the World Cup a year later, and she would be the first one on the field and the last one after. And we talked about these moments over and over again. Anyway, she kicked off deep. New Zealand bobbled the ball, hit it into the hole, just like I was saying earlier. New Zealand turned, fired one bad pass, another bad pass, and then that same girl tackled them out of bounds. We got the line out on their 22. But yeah, just so inspirational. So yeah, we got, I don't know, 50, 60 Canadian kids, Americans, Mexican and Argentinians on this call, and she had them all in tears, I think. But every week we've had Jake Teo, Kayla Molesky, and then this other girl, Ariana Boriani, that plays for the Pumas, share their stories. So it's so inspiring hearing people's journeys. Yeah,
absolutely, and it's cool when you know you had a bit to do with it. So that's awesome. All right, and what about MacDowell Rugby? You've got your own academy happening. You're running some camps under normal circumstances. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that works, and some of the experiences around that coaching?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, when I finished playing for Canada, I was basically traveling out of the back of my truck with a bag of balls and trying to grow the game literally anywhere and everywhere. But after a few years in Saskatchewan, coaching at all levels, I wanted to work a bit smarter. And at that time, SAS Rugby didn't really have the capacity to form their own academy. And obviously there's challenges with, the limited grass, being warm enough and stuff like that. So I just surrounded myself with some excellent people there, former players of mine, that university guys and girls that had gone on to be school teachers and good coaches. And it's basically a solution because the sport was dying in the prairies. And so basically we just run once or twice a week on days that don't conflict with club sessions or high school sessions. Mm-hmm. So our goal is really just to grow the game outside of the pathway to support the pathway or support the stream. And this is our fourth year. 90% of the athletes each year that sign up that are new are non-rugby players that are new rugby players. So it's been a good piece that way. And then since I've relocated to Vancouver Island, the academy still thrives, obviously outside of the COVID world. Mm-hmm. And I'm just people say, are you going to start one on the coast? I said, well, there's lots of rugby going on here, but I'm just guest coaching with different clubs here, trying to support the game, and then mentoring different aspiring athletes on Vancouver Island. And then outside of that, I've had the opportunity to guest coach across the U.S. as well as Canada And most recently in February, before COVID and before the Vancouver Sevens, I got to go to Prince Rupert, and I got an opportunity to coach every single kid in the town of Prince Rupert. And
That's awesome.
I had the best time in that little seaside town. So yeah, it's the most rewarding thing about MacDowell rugby is not just developing players, but developing coaches. And it's, my motto is dream, believe, succeed. So have a dream, surround yourself by people that believe in you. And if you do those things, you'll be successful. And my goal, again, is just to just inspire the next generation and support them.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're doing great stuff. And listeners, if they want to know more, definitely give you a follow on Twitter. I'll put the handle in the show notes so they can check it out. All right, cool. And final question: you've also you're starting up a podcast called the Rugby Hive. Can you talk a little bit about that and what some of the goals are with that production?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. The Rugby Hive has been an idea I've had for a while. But obviously there's lots of traveling involved. Everybody's busy. And I hate to say that I didn't have the time before. Or I like to say I didn't make the time. Yeah. But regardless, I have the time now. So I travel so much around the world, around the country, and I feel so fortunate as a small town Canadian kid to get to interact with some of the best players and coaches in the world. And I wanted to bring their stories to people. And our motto is every legend has a story. The Rugby Hive is here to share it. And it's been it's been really inspiring. And we've had, I think we've already recorded 25. We haven't launched yet. And I partnered with a guy named Dallin Stanford, who's a World Rugby commentator. He commentated in Japan in the World Cup, and he's a mainstay on the World Series. We actually played on the World Series against each other. He played for the U.S., so we kind of smashed heads a few times. But other than that, it's been good fun so far.
Yeah, that's great. And for me, the more content out there, the better, because every podcast I listen to, whether it's rugby related or not, I'll take something from it and throw it into my coaching mix.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so fortunate in this day and age to be able to, that whole knowledge transfer piece. And you know what? The best part is there's been some good tour stories and some other funny roommates. And I'll share one piece. So Nate Hirayama was our first guest, and his best roommate ever was my worst roommate ever. And you'll have to listen to our podcast to find out why.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, we always end the show with the same final 4 questions. When you were a kid growing up and you first got exposed to rugby, who was one of the players that you really looked up to?
Well, I took a look at some of your questions, Andy, and being the most Canadian guy out there, I had to give you a Canadian answer and then a global answer, if that's okay.
Oh, good.
But I got to give a shout out to Gregor Dixon, who was playing for Cowichan in those days and Captain Canada, the Chiefs. So if it weren't for Gregor, I don't think there'd be Robin in that. This is pre-Google for all those young kids out there. He would leave these Hong Kong Sevens and these World Rugby Sevens books on the Cowichan Rugby Club bar or table, and I'd flip through them. And being a hockey kid, you have no idea that these stadiums fill up and just the colors. So, but outside of that, he was just a class human, class Canadian, and was well respected. So he was a big influence in my life, and I just love watching him play. And then outside of Canada, David Campese, because I'm half Italian. So
why not?
I mastered the goose step. Both on the dance floor as well as on the field. So he was a big influence for me. And then a guy named Brenton Palzer from South Africa. He was a small, fast guy, and
absolutely.
And he helped me go through some holes.
Yeah, cool. And I think Campo was the first, because I grew up playing rugby league, and I think the first time I watched the Wallabies play, it was Campo that I was like, holy cow, what's going on here?
Yeah, he was pretty special, and like him, I took a lot of chances and I made a lot of mistakes, but that's how I learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about now? Who are some of the players going around that you like what they're doing?
Well, in Canada, I have to take Pat Kay. He's my protege, but he's 10 times the player I ever was, and that's what I wanted. But for me, he's super consistent on defense and attack, and he's humble, and he's always the first one on the field and still the last one off. And from a woman, I would say Kayla Molesky for the Canadian women. She's the unsung hero. she does the right thing at the right time every time, and every day she shows up to practice with a smile. And then with no favoritism to the Aussie host, my favorite player outside of Canada is Maurice Longbottom, if we're talking sevens. He's a jack in the box. And when he gets on the field, it's like having a little dog loose. And he's an inspiration for me.
Yeah, he's unreal for sure. Completely agree. And fantastic answer. No bias from my side. All right. What about coaches? Who are some of the high-profile coaches who you feel are doing work that you like and respect and get some ideas from?
Again, domestically, I would say John Tate, and he's been doing that for a long time, and I'm truly honored to work with him and under him right now. He's just been consistent, and he's an honest, good, hardworking Canadian guy that is always looking for feedback, and he always puts the game and the athletes first. So, very impressed with John Tate. And outside of Canada, Damien McGrath that spent time here, of course. He was a big influencer of mine and really opened my eyes on my own development, and is just always calm and cool. So, but then outside of Damien, another one of my mentors has been Andy Friend, again, another Aussie. He's at Connaught right now, but when he first started mentoring me, he was with the Aussie Sevens, and we stay in touch all the time. But what I like about both those men is they've been there and done that, but they're still as humble as can be. They are, again, super simple in their approach, and they always put the athletes in the program first. And then lastly, a guy that's kind of closer to my age than I used to play against, but is the New Zealand All Black Sevens coach, Clark Laidlaw, who's a good mate of mine now. And he's the same way as those guys. He's, it's all about the team. Look at the type of coach that I want to be and the type of man that I aspire to be. Those guys kind of are definitely pillars that I work to be like one day.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, I had Damo on the pod and Andy Friend as well. So echo your words there in terms of humility. They were fantastic guests. So definitely be looking to invite John and Clark as well to have a chat to them, no doubt. All right, and last question: who's someone in the grassroots around your community that's doing great work and deserves a shout out?
Yeah, I would say Brett Kannenberg. He's in Saskatchewan. He was a captain of the university side there for a number of years. He's a school teacher now. He also has the guy balances a lot of things. He's got his own woodworking business he does on the side, but he's the main academy coach. And everybody said to me, what's MacDowell Rugby going to look like when you move to the coast? I said, well, it's going to look quite the same when I lived in Saskatchewan because I was never there. And the reason why my program has been successful, and it's been successful because we've been developing athletes, and we've been developing athletes because of Brett Kannenberg. So he's better than me. He's well educated. He's a full-time school teacher, and he's just a very bright mind. But he's taken everything that I've tried to show him, and he's taken it to another level. He's super humble, again, like those gentlemen we were talking about. And because of his schedule and how busy he is, he's not always available, Andy, to go on tour with these select sides. But the Saskatchewan boys, 4 years ago, when we started our Sevens U18 team, we were losing by 80, 90 points to Ontario and BC and Alberta and everybody. And then we won a couple games year 2, and then a couple more games year 3. Well, this last year we just won nationals and beating Ontario in the final. And Brett wasn't available to travel, but he's the man behind the program. He's there religiously coaching these kids in the snow, in the gyms, and has allowed me to do what I've been able to do around the world. So he's a guy that doesn't get enough credit, but anytime I can, I support him. So thank you, Brett, for all you do.
Awesome. It's a great way to wrap things up, Robin. Thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate you giving up your time and to talk about the good work you're doing around Canada in terms of growing the game, and also outside of Canada with the story around Mexico. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you again for giving up some of your time.
Thank you, Andy. It was an honor to be on here. All the best.
No worries. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us via Twitter at RugbyCoachesCNR or via the website therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.